Hello and welcome back to the channel, everyone. This is the Crowdfunding Roundup. This is a new video series that I'm doing with not too much editing. And over time, I think this is probably going to replace the Kickstarter Weekly as well as the list section of my website, Think Outside the Board. And I think in doing that, I'm going to be able to save a lot of time, which is then going to be able to go towards putting out more teach and review videos and doing more live streams of games. So that sounds like a good compromise in my mind. Now, I think what I'm going to do with these is do them 3 days a week. So I'll do one, it'll come out on Wednesday morning, hopefully, and that'll be the big one because it'll have all of the games that were launched the day before on Tuesday, which is the big day for things launching. Then I will do a video like I'm doing today, and that'll cover Wednesday and Thursday, and it'll come out on Friday. And then finally, I will do a video I'll put out on Tuesday, and that video will cover the games that were launched on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So essentially, there'll be 3 of these a week. They'll come out Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So today is the Friday edition, the first of these, and this is going to be covering games that were launched on March 1st and 2nd, which is the Wednesday and Thursday of this week. Now, I have 10 games that I want to go over today, and the video that I did previously in this week that looked at the games that launched on Tuesday, I had 20 games. So this will be half the number of games that we looked at in the Tuesday edition. Okay, so without any further ado, let's get started and look at these campaigns. The first one is called Deal Damage. And I'm just going to kind of go over the things that maybe you should be looking at when you're looking at Kickstarters, but I'm going to attempt to do this more quickly so you can just kind of blow through things and maybe you can watch these videos instead of looking at Kickstarter for yourself. So the first one we've got here is called Deal Damage. This is a rather simple card game. They say fun and fast-paced battle card game for 2 to 5 players. If you look at this is the first thing we're always going to look at, the funding goal. Now, the first 7 campaigns that I'm going to look at today came out on Wednesday. So they've been up for like 2 days at this point. And as I always say, the games tend to do most of their business, 2/3 of their business in the first 24 hours. So the fact that this is only at $500 of a 15,000 goal means that it is not going to fund. But we can take a quick look at it anyway, just to give Corey Matthews his due here. He's got this game called Deal Damage. It's going to complete funding on the 31st of March. He is a relatively new publisher. This is the second campaign that he's run. Let's see. If we want to go over here and look at his other campaign. All right, it was the same campaign and it was canceled. So likely the same thing is now going to happen this time out. And you can see it is basically a damage dealing card game, kind of like War, maybe Uno in the sense that it's just very simple and has character iconography. And you're just kind of fighting each other with these very simple cards. So that is what the game is. And I'm just kind of going through there is actually one video done by Bowers Play that shows off the gameplay. So if you wanted to see what the gameplay is like, that's really where you need to go to do that. And then I think, let's see, he's got, what is this? Right, so a $20 version that is limited to 30 copies, and once that were to sell out, you'd be paying $30 for it. And this $50 pledge would get you multiple copies, maybe if you wanted to play with more players, or just have extra copies, and then there's some retailer pledges. But as you can see, this is a fairly simple card game. It's just kind of a fighting card game. It's got simple iconography, and it is not going to fund. So that's the first campaign that we're looking at, Deal Damage. Then we go to the Demise of Dr. Frankenstein. Did I somehow get the wrong campaign in here? This is Mark Haney. Mark Haney. I think I might have the wrong campaign because but we can go to the right campaign by looking up the publisher. Okay. So we'll see what Mark Haney has created most recently. It is this one, The Demise of Dr. Frankenstein. And here we go. This campaign is the live one. So he only has a $25 funding goal for this. It's already at like $750, so it's going to fund. It's got a funding date of March 31st. If you were to back this, you would be getting your game in August of 2023, I believe. Yeah. And he's got one pledge over here for $25. It's going to get you, you know, the game with all these extra little things in it. And then, what is this? Okay, so for a few dollars more, $29, you're also going to get 90-point coins, these metal 90-point coins. So that's the one upgrade, basically going from one pledge level to the next. And it is a $4 upgrade. So here's what the game looks like. There's the cover. You can see there's some kind of interesting pieces in there. Meeple type pieces. This is the board game. I mean the board for the game. And there's the campaign. So it's not a super highly produced game. You can go down here and click on the rules if you want to see that. Let's just go and look this up on Board Game Geek, which is always your best tool, in my opinion. And actually on Board Game Geek, I already know this is spelled a different way than the campaign. Okay, so here's the campaign here. You can see it was produced before in 2010, so this is an upgraded version of that. And if you look down here, you can see it's horror game, it's novel-based, it's got dice rolling, variable player powers, and worker placement. And basically, you're going to be using the dice to do different kinds of actions. You're going to be using the dice to trigger different characters. One of them is Igor, who'll let you take body parts from the graveyard. So that's kind of the central mechanic here, is rolling dice and then using them for various actions. And if we're curious about what has come before for Mark Haney and for Joe Magic Games, we can go over here and see what he's done. We can look at his... So he's got one game here that's actually ranked. It's called Levitation Masters of Magic. And these are kind of his most recently done games, but none of them have actually ranked on Board Game Geek. So... And Joe Magic Games is his company, so they're basically, these are all just his games. It's the same things. So you're looking at a rather, a small one-man operation for the most part. It didn't even list the artist there. I always try to find the artist information. Yeah, it says here, this is the second printing of the classic Joe Magic game. And I'll read you the little blurb here. It says, scientific advances have given men knowledge they do not yet fully understand and arrogance to attempt to defy the laws of nature. A group of imbalanced and brilliant individuals race to create life and reject death. This is a grisly and often criminal undertaking. In the end, when the townsfolk come bearing torches and pitchforks, will you meet your demise in a blaze of glory, having conquered life and death? Will you be the legendary Dr. Frankenstein, or will you be just another nutjob with a lab full of spare limbs and torsos? So it seems like the townsfolk coming is kind of the soft timer that ends the game. But yeah, it's using dice to take various actions. And it's obviously not that highly a produced game. It's not something that I probably would back myself. And if we're looking at the artist, we're trying to find an artist, which I often do. Let's see, we could look at the rules here. Does Mark Haney credit an artist on here? Oftentimes they're in the bottom if they're listed. No, he does not. So I don't see a credited artist. Let me just do one thing quickly. If I go over to my spreadsheet, actually, you know what? Let's do this instead. Better than my spreadsheet, I think. Let's go from our website, which I won't be probably keeping updated too much longer, but I previously on Kickstarter, this is the columns that I normally run on the website, and I did do one for the last 2 days. So you can see... verify that you're human. We are. Okay, so I have generally on this I would have the videos here and then the various information, usually a summary of the gameplay. So for Dr. Frankenstein, you can see there are no artists credited. So that is essentially the end of that. Let's move on to the third campaign. Oops. Okay, which is for a game called Hellbringer. When you're not doing campaigns on, the campaigns that come out the rest of the week, not on Tuesdays, are often, there's some smaller games. So you're going to see a lot more campaigns by kind of creators who are self-producing games. And I like to be able to show them off and take a look into them, because some of them are really good. You have to look through a lot of things to find the diamonds amidst them. Now, this is a solo or co-op roguelike card game. I actually think one's pretty interesting. I've looked at this one already. It says that it's inspired by Diablo. It has a $19,000 funding goal. They're at $14,000, so it's going to fund. Based on my metrics, it's going to fund. And it'll do that on March 21st. Let's see what else this publisher has run campaigns for, shall we? Okay, so they did Hellbringer once before, and it didn't fund, or it was canceled. They pulled the plug early. They also did a game called Would You Pick that was unsuccessful. So technically, this is still kind of their first campaign. Like, nothing has successfully reached completion before. So this will be their first, Kickstarter game, assuming it funds, which it will. And that means they'll be delivering this. It'll be their first time actually delivering a game. So that's something to keep in mind. Again, people who are doing it for the first time, especially in a post-pandemic age, there are a lot of problems that can happen with global shipping. So, once you've done that a few times, having that experience is really helpful and goes a long way, I think, towards making sure the process is smooth. And if there are, as there inevitably will be, kind of hurdles that come up, you have some experience in clearing those. So, the first two campaigns here that we're looking at, let's see. Oh no, the Demise of Frankenstein actually is going to fund just because the funding goal is so small. So this will fund. But Hellbringer is the first one that I actually am kind of interested in myself personally. Although it's not something I don't think that I would back. There's just too many games out there in the world, but I think they've done a good job with this, and I'm a little intrigued. So it's got this mat here. There are different monsters that are going to be coming out, and you're going to be fighting them with these character cards. You've got different icons here to help you. Okay, so yeah. We've got the first pledge level here. It's called the Hero Tier. It's $48. It's the core game and the stretch goals. This is going to deliver in December 2024. So this is a long ways off, especially for a game that, it doesn't have huge production behind it. Sometimes you'll see that with a CMON game, where if they're doing all these miniatures, it takes them a while to actually produce the thing. But this is probably a case of a smaller creator baking in a lot of extra time just to have themselves covered, so that they won't not meet that funding goal, which is not a bad thing, but that is a long ways off. That almost makes you a little nervous on the other side, that they're giving themselves so much time. But on the other hand, it's always good to under-promise and over-deliver. So they have a second pledge level here. It is the Monster Tier for $95. That's going to add in a couple of probably smaller expansions, Loots and Merchant, and Quests and Events. And then they've got this Demon Tier, which is going to add on some kind of gameplay upgrades, dice, and a deck holder. And then they've got their All-In Tier, which includes... What does that include that the Demon Tier doesn't? All add-ons. So there's going to be even more add-ons that go into that. So anyway, here's the game. That's kind of what it looks like. Here's the gameplay. You've got these cards coming out, and you're fighting. It's a card game and a fighting game. All right, so here they kind of break down what's in the various pledge levels. So they're highlighting all the cards and the various dice and things that you're going to be using in the base game. We go to the Monster Tier here. We get these two expansions, Loots and Merchant expansion, which is going to add in more cards and things into the game, give you a lot more variability. The quests and events expansion probably adds on some gameplay elements as well, so you can be trying to fulfill quests while you're doing the fighting. There's, you know, a board, an additional board as well. We go into the demon tier, and this is when you add in the, you know, the card holder and some extra dice. And then the all-in tier, I'm just curious what they actually add into this. Okay, so they're giving you card sleeves with this. A dice, the dice tray, so you can, you know, roll in the dice tray, and a playmat. So those are all the upgrades there. Let's see. What else do we need to know about Hellbringer that would be helpful to know? We did learn already that it's basically a first-time designer / artist. The publisher is called Les Editions Smash, which again I believe is just, you know, the publishing entity of the designer / artist. It's often the case. So we've got an adventure card game, fantasy horror, it's got action points, it's a cooperative game, deck building, dice rolling, there's line of sight, so there's going to be some line of sight rules, drafting, role-playing, solitaire, and variable player powers. And over here, this is how they describe it very simply on Board Game Geek. They say it's a solo co-op, so you can play it by yourself or cooperatively with friends. It's a dark fantasy roguelike card and dice game where you play as a hero venturing into the darkness of a dungeon to slay its mighty demon. As you venture deeper and deeper in the dungeon, you will equip items, learn skills, and earn attribute points by eliminating monsters, making you even more powerful. The game is fast-paced, lasts about 45 minutes per player, and the setup is simplistic. And I'd say all of that looks very true to me. And, you know, for what this is, I'm actually pretty impressed. It looks like they've got a solid game in here. You know, you can look at some gameplay if you want. I've looked at it a little bit. But yeah, you basically have these monsters that come out and you sort of choose where you place them and then you're fighting them. And then obviously the higher pledge levels are going to give you additional mechanics and things that you can pull into, like different weapons and quests and stuff. But, you know, it's not the highest level game, but for something that, you know, an independent person is kind of self-producing, it's not bad, right? I mean, the art looks decent. It's fairly clear. The iconography is pretty good. And there are things about it that are intriguing. So that is Hellbringer. Then we go to Scholars of the South, Tigris. And this is by Garpel Games. Most gamers probably know Garpel Games. They've done the Of the North Sea series. So you've got Explorers, Raiders, and Shipwrights of the North Sea. Then they did another trilogy, Architects, Paladins, and Viscounts of the West Kingdom. They also have a science fiction trilogy that they're in the middle of, which is Circadian's First Light and Circadian's Chaos Order. And they have now launched the South Tigris trilogy. This is kind of fitting in with the North Sea and West Kingdom trilogy. So they're planning on doing 4 trilogies, and each one is going to have a different cardinal direction in the name. So they've done West, they've done North, they're now doing South. People thought that their first 2 trilogies were a little Anglo, a little white, so they've themed this new trilogy around Arabia. And this one particularly is a little bit different from what they've done before. They've already delivered the first game in this series called Wayfarers of the South Tigris, and all of the games are designed by Shem Phillips, and he's now working with S.J. McDonald. S.J. McDonald started working on the design with the Circadians trilogies and with some of the West Kingdom games. So those 2 trilogies. The first one, North Sea, that was all Shem Phillips. So now they're kind of working on these together. Wayfarers has been delivered already. I haven't had a chance to play it yet. But I hear it favorably being compared to Viscounts of the West Kingdom, and that's probably my favorite of their games to date, although I have not played Paladins of the West Kingdom. So this is the second game of the trilogy. I'm spending all this time talking about it because this is the kind of first big game that we're looking at. And they had, you know, for their games, they had a rather modest funding goal of $14,000. They're already at $280,000, you know, 48 hours in. So, I mean, their games are just really good games. They're some of the best games out there, in my opinion. But they're obviously going to fund. I don't think there was ever a question. And let's take a closer look at this one. So it's going to complete its funding on the 15th. If you wanted to, look at Garpel games, you could do that. I've already kind of talked about it, so it's probably unnecessary at this point. You can see I've actually already pledged this one myself. I didn't need to pledge a higher level because I already have Wayfarers, and I already have some metal coins for them, so I didn't feel the need to go and get metal coins with this pledge level as well. So what I actually did is the most basic pledge you can get, which is the game and the promo pack. And they have several different pledge levels. This one's in English. There's another pledge level down here, and this one's in like French, Italian, or it might be Brazil. And so this is going to deliver to those countries. So you just want to make sure that you're pledging whichever is the right language for you. But these games are not, for how good these games are and for how prevalent they've become in gaming, the price is pretty good on these. So you're looking at $44 for this plus shipping. Let's take a quick look at their shipping. So in the continental US, you're looking at 20 New Zealand dollars. Unfortunately, since I've already pledged, I can't, or can I? No, I can't use their little calculator. You know what? But I have a calculator of my own, and it's already plugged in here that it's 57. There's already a conversion here. 57 divided by 90. Let's see, times 20. So I think we're looking at about $13 once you convert this to US bucks. So that means if you're pledging at this, this rate, the $44 with shipping, it's like $57. It's, fairly affordable for a game of this caliber. And then they've got additional pledge levels. This one adds in a metal coin pack. So it goes up about $13, which means your shipping will go up. No, actually, your shipping will stay the same. So $13 more plus 13, you're going to be looking at, I think, $70 for the pledge level with the coins. And then they have a pledge level down here where you can also pick up Wayfarers, which is the previous game in the trilogy, with the promo pack for that game. So they've kind of got you covered in all the different levels, and they're all pretty affordable for what it is. I'm a big fan of the publisher and their games. I will say, let's talk about the game itself, because that's merited here. This game's a little bit different than some of their other games. They do a lot with card play, worker placement. There's worker placement in this as well. But central to Scholars is this kind of series of tracks in the middle of it. And I originally thought, this looks a lot like something like Lost Ruins of Arnak, but Lost Ruins of Arnak is a smaller track where you're racing up it and you're kind of competing with the other players. This is a series of tracks. There's 6 of them. They're different colors. So that reminds me a lot of like Terra Mystica or Gaia Project, where everyone is going to be going up all of these tracks, and they're kind of all moving up them at different rates, and moving up the tracks will give you more actions. But what you're essentially doing in this game is you have these 4 Caliph characters that'll come out that are sort of power/goal cards. Once the last Caliph card comes out, it triggers the end of the game. But until that point, players are going to be drafting these various translators, and they're trying to translate from all of these different languages into Arabic. And I think one of the most difficult ones to start with is Chinese, so it requires kind of more in-between steps. But you're going to be drafting these different cards. Once you do, you'll put them on the bottom of the board down here, which you can't see too well, but it's down there. And you'll put a marker on it that denotes that, it's your card, like you were the player that drafted that card. And then in the future, you'll be able to use that character's power in what you're doing, and when other players want to use that character's power, they can, and they'll have to pay you some money to do that. And then at a certain point in the game, you'll retrieve some of these characters that you have down here, and you'll slot them under your player board, and that will give you, even more bulked abilities. And so when you do that, it will give you kind of increased abilities when you take the general actions in the game. And the general actions in the game have to do with, recruiting these characters and going up the tracks and kind of moving around this part of the board over here that's underneath the box. But you're basically doing all this kind of translation in this game. So it feels a little bit different than some of their other games. It's still, there's a worker placement element to it, but central to it is this kind of track system and doing all of these kind of conversions. It's a bag building game, so there's dice. You're going to be drafting these different colored dice, and then you'll be using certain dice to get other dice, kind of harder to get dice. And there's a lot going on with kind of conversion of dice from one color to another and the various actions that they give you. But it's you know, it feels very Garpell in a lot of ways, and it's still got this wonderful art by the Miko that's in all of their games. He does great art. He's done pretty much all of their games from the beginning. He hasn't done the science fiction trilogy. That's actually done by Shem Phillips' brother, but he's done all of the North Seas, West Kingdoms, and now the South Tigris games. And he's done other games too. He's done a lot of the Valeria Card Kingdoms games. He's done some of the games for, I'm blanking on the publisher, but like Bardwood Grove, Merchant's Cove. He's also done the Imperium Classics and Legends games. There's a third game in that series coming out this year. And he did the art for Endless Winter Paleo-Americans. So he's like super prolific. And if you are into board gaming at all, you probably recognize his art. I believe his name is pronounced Mahalo Dmitrievsky, but he goes by the Miko for short. And great art, wonderful art, super. It always brings me into the game, whatever it is. I want to say it's thematic, but it's just, yeah. Here's a shot of his art. So it's great art, and if you have played Garpell game stuff before, you're familiar with their iconography. It's kind of carries over from one game to the next, which makes it a little bit easier to pick up, you know, later games of theirs, right? Because you're already kind of familiar with a lot of their iconography, and it's evolved and changed from game to game in some ways as the mechanics have changed, but there's kind of a foundation of it being the same starting iconography. Anyway, as you can see, I've already backed this one, so this is something that I'm a huge fan of Garpell and their stuff. Next up, we've got Star Tycoon, Build Your Galactic Corporation. You can see they've got a funding goal of $26,000. They're at $17,000. So they're going to fund. They're going to fund on March 30th. Pete Sanderson, let's see what he's done before, out of Australia. I will say that I am intrigued by this game. Here's Peter Sanderson in a Star Trek uniform. Okay, so he's basically done one game before. I think they took a couple goes to get it going, Mothership Table Combat. So I think it may have actually funded the first time, and then they brought it back, and it didn't fund. But he's kind of, as you can see, he's doing like upgraded versions and kind of expanded on it, second edition. And this eventually did fund as well. So this Mothership, what is it called? Mothership Tabletop Combat. This is really the one game that he's produced, but he's done it a couple times and sort of refined it. I don't actually know the game. I haven't played it, but perhaps you have. But that's his big claim to fame. And this actually looks a little simpler than Mothership Table Combat because this is mainly a card game. Let's take a look at the pledge levels first. So we've got the executive pledge here for $34. It includes the game and a promo pack. And then there's a vice president pledge that adds in a neoprene mat. And then there's a CEO pledge that adds in some acrylic tokens, a pack of 152. And then there's a retailer pledge. So, you know, I'm a completist, so I usually like to go for the big thing, especially if it's got nice tokens. Let's take a look. So this would be $74 for the all-in. And if you were pledging this, let's look for shipping down here. Friendly shipping. Okay. All right, so it's, you know, the shipping's pretty affordable. $12 for the base, $16 for the middle pledge with the playmat, and then also $16 for the version with the acrylic tokens. So let's see what you're actually getting here. Let's see what that looks like if they have it up top. There's a rule book you can look at if you want to see more about the gameplay. It looks like, let's reload this page because it looks like it hasn't quite properly loaded up. Okay. All right, so there is, you can see it's a card game. You're doing a lot with these cards, drafting these cards. You've got a player area where you're building a tableau. There are these probably resources, tokens you're going to be using, and then there's a central area here with some tracks on them. I think, we've probably all played games that do a lot of these things. And the question is, how well does he do it compared to some of those other games? But it looks well done to me. I like the art. The iconography is pretty simple and readable. Okay, so here they're breaking down what the pledges actually look like. So here's the tokens. So these are the tokens. In the base game, they're going to be cardboard. And in the highest pledge level, you will get the acrylic tokens. And for something like this, that's probably a good deal. I know I prefer playing with something that has a little more heft, a little more weight in your hand, rather than all these kind of like lightweight cardboard tokens that when you're playing with this many tokens, they can just they can go everywhere. I guess the question is whether you want to pay, if you got them as an add-on, it would be a $25 add-on. And it looks like if we go up in pledge level, yep, it's about a $25 increase from the pledge level with the playmat. So the question is whether you want to pay $25 extra for the upgrade to acrylic tokens. Let's just take a quick look over at this on Board Game Geek before we move on to the next thing. Star Tycoon. Okay. Warp Core Games, it's for 1 to 6 players, so you will be able to play this solo. They list it here as an economic game with industry manufacturing, a science fiction theme. It's got auction bidding, endgame bonuses, events, income, a market. This is a lot of the stuff that we physically saw, set collection, and turn order progressive. So the turn order is going to rotate around somewhat based on what you do. Players will take on the role of an interstellar business with the goal of outperforming their business rivals by the last round. Each player gains victory points by claiming sets of planets and developing them with production facilities and other buildings. Central to Star Tycoon is the Galactic Exchange, a fluctuating market that reacts supply and demand. Knowing when to buy and when to sell is key, creating a profitable business. So you're doing this tableau building, and you're kind of using a moving market. I really like these kinds of games. I don't think this is something that I'm going to back just because there are a lot of games out there that are like this. But it looks really well done, and I think he's done a good job with it. And if this was like, if these were my favorite kinds of games, maybe I would consider backing it. I think he's done the work. Moving on, we've got Sweet Deals. Let's see what's going on. Let's reload this page. Ships to US only. So they've got a $5,000 goal on this. They're already over it, so it is going to fund. It's going to complete its funding on the 31st. It's by Surprisingly Fun Games. Let's take a look at them. They've only done one other thing. And I'm going to stop talking about the risk inherent in terms of just labeling it, high, low, medium, low. We're just going to deal with what things actually look like. So they've done one other game before. It was this tiny little tin game, which means, they've gone through the motions once, but they don't have a ton of experience. So in my mind, this is a higher risk just because they're kind of new to the game, so to speak. On the other hand, they're producing a probably rather small card game. And so there's not a lot of money to lose if you're pledging a cheap card game. I think the highest risk games are the ones where, someone's doing it for the first time and they're producing something that is just got a huge production to it, miniatures, all this stuff. So the co-designer of Zia Embers of a Forsaken Star likes it. Our pledge levels, let's take a look at these first. So we've got a print and play pack for $5. You can get the game for $18, and that will also include the print and play versions. And then for $30, you're going to get multiple copies of the game. Usually, I don't really consider those versions. I think that's only something that you want if you're buying it for somebody else. In some cases in a card game, you might want multiple copies so you can just play with more people. But in general, I think that's just a way for the publisher just to try to make more money, sell multiple copies simultaneously. And then they've got a pledge level here for 4 copies all included at once, although that's limited to only 50 pledges. Okay, so this is essentially a card game where you're dealing with desserts. And, the art is nice. It's rather simple. The iconography and the graphic design is pretty clear. I'm just looking for shipping as well. Do we have shipping on here? So you can add on their previous game for 10 bucks. I don't see shipping listed, but let's do this. Let's say I was going to try to pledge it. They're going to add in the shipping. So it's 25 bucks. So it's, you know, it's pretty cheap. It's a card game. Let's take a quick look at it on Board Game Geek. Sweet deals. So we can see here that it's for 2 to 8 players. It's designed by Sean Patton. I don't know Sean Patton. Is this? I think we'd already decided that. So Sean's designed Mischief at the Museum and Tin Spin. Tin Spin was that tin game. I don't know what the deal is with Mischief at the Museum, but it looks like it was I don't know if it was even published, but it's not ranked on Board Game Geek. I usually only look at the games that are actually ranked, so nothing here has gotten a rank. This is a card game with auction and bidding, and it's themed around cookies, donuts, and ice cream and gelato. And what they say here on Board Game Geek is, in this sweet dessert-themed card bidding game, players manage their hand of cards, bid on others' cards, and try to get multiples of the same type of dessert as well as a high value of coins. On your turn, you offer a dessert for others to bid on. The first person to get 6 of a kind or Sweet 6 ends the game, but may not win because of the way scoring works. So that'll be the end game trigger, but then whoever has the most points wins. You know, it reminds me a bit of something like Sushi Go. All right, the last campaign for Wednesday is called Wards of Stonefall, Chapter 1. I'm actually pretty impressed by this. This is a print and play game. They had a goal here of 200 bucks. They're at 700, so it's funding. And there is no physical production of this. I'm actually considering backing this. It's $7. That'll get you the print and the play with the stretch goals. Or $10 if you want to throw them some extra money. It'll get your name on the backer pledge. It's you know, I call those vanity rewards when it's not really doing anything, but just kind of like assuaging your own ego. But it's also a way to give them some extra cash. And I do know that they are planning on doing 5 chapters of this. This is the first chapter. So if they do well and everything kind of continues on in this vein, that means you'll essentially end up paying $35 for all 5 chapters. And this is sort of a print and play roll and write game with a story behind it. And each chapter, at least the first chapter here, has 3 different acts. So you'll essentially play 3 games of it, and there's kind of a continuing narrative story as you play. You're going to have to provide your own dice because it's a print and play. And this is, you can see that's kind of what the sheets look like and the game. You're going to be filling this out. It's like a roll and write. I like the art, you know, and I like roll and writes. They're always fun, I think. And here, they've got this, you're going to be printing this out as well. It's kind of a narrative that goes along with it. So you're getting a story with your roll and write. And the combination of those things, I think, is pretty cool. Words of Stonefall, this is, you know, it's a good thing, I think, for smaller publishers and designers to kind of do this sort of thing. You can get your game out there. You can get people playing it. You can hopefully keep the lights on, you know, make enough money to do that. And you're not putting out a game that is a lot of risk for either you or for the backers. So you can get your feet wet and hopefully deliver a good gaming experience to people as you do it. And then maybe if you know what you really want to do is do physical productions of games, you can do that later. I do know that this publisher did a physical game before, and I think they've retreated to this just because physical production is a lot, right? This is kind of easier. And they've said that they wanted to do sort of a big box game without everything that goes along with that. So I guess by the time they get through, 5 chapters of this, you would have, if it continues being 3 acts per game, you're talking 15 kind of games in a roll and write campaign. And essentially, this pledge, $7, would get you, you can replay it, but it would get you 3 games that are kind of connected. So you're paying about $2 per game session if you don't replay it. But probably it's fun. Should we play the video? I guess I might need to.
It's been all but destroyed by the Wyrms. 6 powerful stones are the only thing that keep them at bay, and they will stop at nothing to destroy them. In Wards of Stonefall, players take turns drafting dice and adding them to their sheets. The remaining die becomes a whim that attacks one of your sanctums. The wards can only hold for so long, however. Destroy the whims in order to see the morning's light and live to fight another night. Wards of Stonefall is an engaging puzzle of survival reminiscent of Sudoku and tower defense games. Come join the fight and determine the fate of Stonefall and humanity.
So there's your narrative book.
Hi, we're Backfire Game Studio. I'm McKay.
And I'm Matt.
All right, I'm going to stop it there. I don't think we need to hear them talk, but that showed you what the game looks like. And, I'm impressed. And for $7, you kind of can't go wrong. There's not much risk. In this day and age, that's essentially the price of a coffee latte. If you're going to like Coffee Bean or Starbucks or something and getting an expensive coffee. So, that was the last game from Wednesday. And then I've got 3 games that launched on Thursday. The first of these is called Carom Mini Golf. They've already funded, so $500 funding goal, $1,500 they're at right now. This campaign is going to complete on April the 2nd, and it will get delivered on October 2023. Now, something that confused me a little bit, because if you look at this, it almost looks like it's a dexterity game, right? But it's not. It's not a dexterity game. It is a hex game where you're going to be rolling dice, and essentially you have different colored dice that represent different clubs. So you're going to be sort of picking the die that you want to use based on what club you would be using. And the dice are sort of more powerful, depending on what club it is. And every die, has a different range. So, the equivalent of like a 9-iron, which doesn't really go that far in real golf, would probably be a smaller, a die with a smaller range on it, so you're not going to hit it as far. Whereas, if you wanted the equivalent of like a 3-wood, that would have, the most power on the die, but also the most range. And so you're going to roll that die, and then you'll move your ball as many hexes as you roll. Now, I think in golf, the randomization factor, even amongst professional golfers, is that you may not always hit it quite as hard as you want, or the wind could take it. There's some variabilities in golf, even amongst professionals. In this, because you're rolling a die and it's going to have a number that comes up, there's some variance in that. But I believe, and it's a little unclear in the rulebook, they said that the player gets to determine the direction, but they didn't say if you have to determine the direction before or after you roll the die. That's pretty crucial, right? Because if you have to say what direction you're going in first, you're going to be stuck with that. But if you can roll the die and then based on the die roll, change what direction your ball goes into, you'll have more options in terms of where your ball goes and where it ends up. And I believe that's the second one, that you roll the die and then you determine what direction your ball is going to travel. But I'm not 100% because they're not clear on that in the rule book. But I think that would make for the more interesting gameplay. Obviously, that wouldn't be consistent with real-world golf because you have to hit your ball in a certain direction before you hit it. You don't make contact with the ball and then pause physics and decide what direction for it to go into. But I think that would make the more interesting game. So they've already published this game once before in 2010. This is a kind of more highly produced version of it. And if we look at this, Carom Mini Golf, this actually may not even, no, it's not even in here. This is the previous version, which does have a board game geek listing back from 2010. It's called Mini Golf, and this is the designer and the artist, and the publishing company is called Forsage Games. They do some other things. So they historically they did this game called Tank Chess, these dogfight games. So they've done war games in the past. They only have 2 games that have ratings. There's Tank Chess and the Age of Dogfights World War I. So it's not like they're a publisher that has like a lot of games that have done well on Board Game Geek. It's still a kind of a smaller publishing entity, but they have done this a couple times. They have produced some games. So they're not doing it for the first time, but they're not like a publisher who's put out a lot of really successful, well-regarded games. They have relaunched their publishing entity, or they've created a new one called Forsage Light Games. And that's supposed to differentiate them from the war games that they've done in the past. And so I think they're starting with Carom Mini Golf as their first game in this line, but I think they're going to be looking at doing more kind of lighter games and family games in this line. Now, if this is something that you're interested in, they do have a print and play version for $5. If you want the physical version, it's $34. And then they've got another version for $60 with the dynamic expansion. So let's see what that is quickly. The expansion contents. So you're going to get another board with 2 more holes on it and kind of more of these pieces that are, it feels like a mini golf course, right? There are going to be these plastic pieces that you can put into the course. It'll give you more variability because you can kind of alternate this as you want. And it mixes the course up. So that expansion would give you more variability. But it's kind of cool that they do have a print and play available. Let's see if they've got shipping here. Here we go. Okay, so $20 is the shipping pretty much wherever they are and whatever you're pledging at. So you're looking at $54 for the base game and $80 if you get it with the expansion. And I mean, this isn't something I'm going to back. I don't know the depth or variability of this, but I think they've done a good job for what it is. I'm intrigued. It's something I definitely would have fun playing once, perhaps, and looking into. Okay, from there we go to Secrets in the Sand, and this is probably my favorite campaign from Thursday. And this is a smaller publisher. I think this is their first game. Their funding goal is $11,000, which I think is a pretty good funding goal, right? It's not one of these tiny little funding goals that doesn't actually cover what you need to produce the game. This is probably a realistic funding goal, and they're about halfway there. So, I say that you need to do about 2/3 of your funding in the first 24 hours. They haven't done that yet, but they do have a small funding goal. So it is possible that they could get there, if people discover this and jump on board. So it's not necessarily out of reach, but they're not keeping pace with, I think, what they would want to fund. Now, if it does fund, it'll fund on April 1st. Canterville Games is the name of the publisher. This is kind of their first game here. And let's see what we've got here. So for the game itself, it's a $51 pledge. And their higher pledge levels are simply for multiple versions of the game. And shipping, where is your shipping? It's $11. So if you pledge this game, it's going to be $62, which I think is, by today's standards, that's not too bad. Let's take a quick look over at this. Okay, so it's an adventure, ancient Arabian exploration game. It's got command cards, dice rolling, grid movement, network and route building, point-to-point movement. It's got worker placement, and it's a race. And I'll read you the little thing here. So it says, the Department of Antiquities has uncovered evidence of a series of lost tombs. They have invited you, the world's leading archaeologists, to help find the lost tombs and recover their treasures. Each day, the Minister of Antiquities will announce one new dig permit, and the first expedition to find a viable route is allowed to travel and dig. Race against competing archaeological expeditions across desert sands, through jungle oases, and across rivers to find the tombs. But beware of scorpions, raiders, and sandstorms along the way. The game ends when all tombs are discovered, or an expedition runs out of dig camps, whichever occurs first. Either way, the player with the most points wins the game. So, now I'm not saying that this looks like an amazing game, but I'm saying that for a smaller game, first-time publisher, I kind of like what they're doing, and they've done some stuff. So you can see the board is fairly simple. It's got these tents that you're going to be placing out. You've got cards here, which I like the art. The iconography, it works. The graphic design is simple. Like, everything is simple, but I feel like there's a good game in here, right? So it's not super overproduced. It's not going to necessarily wow anyone with the table presence, but I think they've got a functional game that actually looks like it might be compelling. It's just they're producing it on a lower level so that they can actually produce it and it seems like they're doing it in sort of smart ways, and they still have a good game in here. So and I like their art. Their art itself is pretty cool. Like, I like this. So I'm kind of impressed with this for a smaller thing. And they've got the designer here, Aaron Shapland, the illustrator, Elena Rabina. And let's take a quick look at the video for this one as well.
Deep in the desert of the ancient Near East, among rolling dunes of golden sand, a civilization was lost thousands of years ago, until now. The Department of Antiquities has uncovered evidence of a series of lost tombs. They have invited you, along with the world's leading archaeologists, to help find the lost tombs and recover their treasures. You and up to 5 other expeditions have arrived in town and are ready to go. Each day, the Minister of Antiquities will announce one new dig permit, and the first expedition to find a route is allowed to travel and dig.
I'm just going to hit pause here for a second. A lot of time, I don't like it when there's just all this kind of overproduced video that doesn't really show off the game. And there was some of that in the beginning, but they did show the character art, and so that was good. And the other thing is this board here, I'm not loving the board initially, but in the video when you see it laid out with the little tents on that, it actually works. I think it does work for it, and I think the table presence, it does work.
Race against competing archaeological expeditions across desert sands, through jungle oases, and across
and
rivers.
The cards and the graphic design, it's really all you need.
But beware of scorpions, sandstorms, and dangers of the desert, for only one expedition can win. Secrets in the Sand. Order your copy today.
All right, so it's obviously not the most highly produced game. It's probably not going to take the world by storm, but I'm impressed. I'm impressed with what they've done, and I think there may be a good little game under the hood here. So this is something I'd like to see fund. I just think that we need more success of stuff like this in this hobby, and then who knows what they'd go on to do next, right? So I do like this one, and then we've got one final game to look at. Now this is called Whelps to Wyrms Resurrection Project. And that's a mouthful, right? Resurrection Project. What does this all mean? And Spyglass Games. I investigated this. So this was Whelps to Wyrms originally came out as a project on Kickstarter in 2016. I think the guy's name was Michael Reeson, who was kind of very Christian. And he had done a few games before, and he went to produce this game called Whelps to Wyrms. His big thing was he wanted to have dragon miniatures in it. And I'm not going to play the videos for this one. We've already done that, I think, twice in this video. But they're tiles that were intended to be dragon miniatures, and the gameplay to me looks like a little bit Dwellings of Eldervale and a little bit Vindication, if you're familiar with either one of those games. So you've got tile placement, and you're going to be moving around a board, and you're going to be doing things to supplement the tiles with other tiles. And then there is some kind of battling and dragons, and you can upgrade your dragons. So that funded in 2016. And then I think there were various problems with production of things. The game was completely produced, but they never actually got the miniatures produced because he sort of ran out of money. And once he had the first part of the game produced, he had to pay out of pocket to get it shipped to him. And he was already a bit underwater. And so then it was getting into 2019, I believe. And he went radio silent. He had the games kind of in one area of the country, but it didn't include the miniatures. And he was going to have to try to pay shipping out of pocket to distribute the games. The whole thing it went underwater, and the games were never delivered. And then I think as he was working on a solution, forward into 2020, and the COVID global pandemic happened, which I'm sure didn't help, because then he had all of the increased shipping prices. I think he was already kind of done at that point, but if he hadn't have been, that would have delivered the final coffin nail. So in the meantime, the game had never been delivered. You've got backers of the original Kickstarter who never got their games. And recently, the game was sold off or whatever, acquired by this new publisher, Spyglass Games. And this is their attempt to produce the game. And I love it when stuff like this happens, because you want the games to get out there, especially if people already paid for it once. And a similar thing happened with Euthia, where the original publisher of Euthia couldn't continue making the game. They were in the middle of an additional crowdfunding campaign for it, and they had to shutter the campaign because they realized while it was doing well, that game was so expensive and had so much going on under the hood that they needed so much more than they'd even budgeted. So they canceled their campaign, and then another publisher came along and sort of resurrected it and kept it going. And so now that game is getting sort of a second lease on life. I was able to back it with that additional campaign, and it's finally getting out there. And Euthia is a game that is incredibly well regarded and rated. It's one of the highest rated games of, a couple years ago. So it was really great that got saved. I think one of the cool things about this campaign is that this new publisher has promised that if this game funds, they will be delivering copies of the game to all of the original backers. So it's something that I really would like to see succeed. But look at this. They have a funding goal of $40,000 to make this happen, and they're currently at $2,000. And this is, 24 hours in, so it's not going to happen. And to make matters worse, see, here are the new publisher talking about this. It's a lot of noble goals here, noble aspirations. This is what the game looks like now. They're using standees because they just decided the miniatures were never produced, and I think they made the smart decision with this new version of the game not to do that. Not to try to put miniatures back in. Like, let's just produce the game. Let's just try to produce it, right? I mean, it didn't get produced the first time. It never got delivered. It overreached in terms of production and what they could do. So let's just try to at least produce and deliver the scaled back version of the game. And so I love the idea of this project. I don't think that it's something that I would personally back, just because Dwellings of Eldervale already exists. Andromeda's Edge, which is Dwellings of Eldervale in space, through a better publisher now, Cardboard Alchemy, that game exists. Vindication through Orange Nebula is a fantastic game, and that game exists. But this game was actually, designed and was on crowdfunding before those games. It never made it. Never made it there. And so I really like the idea that this is out there in the wild, and they're trying to one last gasp at making this happen. The pledge is $60, but here's the other part of this, and this may be why it's not funding. They don't list a shipping price anywhere. They say that shipping will be charged after the campaign, but they never give shipping estimates. And I understand that with everything that's happened in the world, it's kind of hard to give shipping estimates right now, but in my opinion, you have to do that. And then you look at, in addition to this is a game that didn't fund the first time before. It didn't deliver to backers because it ran into problems at the shipping stage. So I can understand them not wanting to, give a shipping quote and then having to go back later and amend that. But when you're dealing with a campaign that already didn't deliver once because of shipping issues, among other things, to not have a shipping quote this time out is, in my mind, hugely problematic. I wouldn't think that the risk on this would be that high, because Spyglass Games, let's just see, what is this? Whelps to Wyrms. And this is like this new version of that Resurrection project. But if we go here and we put this into Board Game Geek, you're going to get the, I guess they've updated it now. Lamplight Games was the first publisher, though. And this is the, where is it? Mike Friesen is the guy who ran the original campaign. And I think, let's just see, what did they... Yeah, I mean, they did this game, Nautilus Industries. They did this game called Space Junk, and then Whelps to Wyrms was pretty much the end of that company. So they died. They died trying to make this thing happen. And like I say, the gameplay looks actually pretty cool. A I'll leave it to you if you want to look into it more. Exploration, fantasy, medieval. It's got action points, dice rolling, modular board, and variable player powers. But it does feel to me like a combination of Dwellings of Eldervale and Vindication. However, it's not as well produced, obviously, as both of those. But I think the real death knell is the fact that there's no shipping estimates. And when you're dealing with this, a game that's kind of, they said this is the final time to try to make this game and get it delivered. And if it doesn't happen now, they're just going to give up the ghost on it. And it's I don't know. It's too much risk to not even have shipping estimates given on another go round of this. So I don't know if that's the only reason that the funding is so low. I was looking in the comments, and there were a lot of very excited commenters, I think, glad to see this game come back from the dead, and maybe, backers of the original campaign hoping to finally get their game. Although at this point, they'd probably already written it off. But I can't... the good-hearted part of me would like to help out with this, at least as a backer, but I can't in good conscience do that, especially when there's no shipping estimates. And, I mean, it's... Unless they get a lot of people who are, coming into this late out of the kindness of their hearts, there's just no way in hell this is going to fund with that progress. They're only at 4%. And this one's on Gamefound, though. This is the only campaign of everything I've looked at that is not on Kickstarter. This one's on Gamefound. So... I don't know. Out of the goodness of your heart, if you want to try to make a difference here, you could go in and pledge it. But I don't think that's going to make a difference at this point, considering how low they are on funding. Anyway, these are the 10 campaigns that we're looking at in this video. This was for Wednesday and Thursday of this week. I'll be back on Tuesday with another video looking at all the campaigns that launched today, Friday, and over the weekend, and then I'll have another video the day after that on Wednesday looking at everything that launched on Tuesday. So this is what I think I'm going to be doing from now on, instead of doing the Kickstarter weekly, which takes a lot more work in terms of editing, and I look at fewer campaigns than that. So probably what's going to happen, I'm still looking at, likes and things like that. And again, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate that. That's the best way to support this channel at this point in time. But I think if I stop doing the Kickstarter weekly and stop spending all that time editing those videos, they require a lot of editing, and I stop doing the updates, the daily updates, the roundup posts on the website, thinkoutsidetheboard.com, and instead of doing both of those kinds of content, I combine them into these videos and do these videos 3 times a week, I think I'm looking at about 15 hours of work a week instead of 40 to 60 hours of work. And that time will then be able to be used by me in the future, producing more teach and review videos, more videos that focus on strategy and gameplay, kind of doing deep dives into games and doing more live streaming of games. Last crowdfunding roundup, I looked at it in Age Contrived, and that's something that I've considered backing. I think I probably am not going to, but there's another game out there that I'm really interested in called Aventuria, which is a card game, sort of like an Arkham Horror, the card game, one of those, kind of deck building campaign type games. And this one is been produced in Europe before, and so they're doing like English translations of it now. And it's based in the Dark Eye world, which is pretty big in Europe. And I've played some video games set in that world. It's like a fantasy kind of D&D type world. I really like it a lot. And so I am looking at possibly backing that Aventuria card game, which is kind of a narrative adventure card game. There's a lot. You can go really deep into that campaign if you want to look at pledging that. But that's the kind of thing I'd really like to do live streaming, because it's a whole experience that I think we can share together, and I can play and you can follow along. And it's a game that's maybe not out there. Like, a lot of people don't have that. So their best way to experience that might be through a live stream. So I do want to do a lot of dungeon crawlers, a lot of solo stuff, some Euros through live streaming, but I also think it would be neat to focus on some games that are hard to find elsewhere so that people can get a look at things that they don't have another way to take a look at it. Until next time, until next week, have a great weekend, play lots of great games, and I'll see you very soon. Take care.